welcome back to the Share Vancouver podcast. Today we have a powerhouse and a fearless guest who dedicates her life to activism. She is a high school social justice teacher, a fierce human rights defender, and was one of the Pride Grand Marshals for Vancouver Pride 2022. She is here to agitate and organize. Let's welcome Annie Ohana.
Hello.
Woo. How you doing, Annie?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Excited
We
to
love
be
your
here.
shirt.
Thank you. Yes, Mustang Justice all the way.
All the way. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us.
My pleasure, my honor, all of it.
Season 2, episode 3, here we go.
Here we go.
That's great though. It's like we're in the multiple seasons now. Woohoo.
I know.
Yeah.
We're growing, and thank you for our audience for tuning in.
Absolutely.
So, Annie, let's jump right into it. Everyone who is a teacher knows who you are, so we want to bring forth your story to everyone else. So let's get right into it. Can you tell us about your origin story?
And I love that question, the origin story.
Yeah.
you know, a summer day in Montreal, and I'm not going to go that far back. So I mean, in terms of teaching, so interestingly enough, a lot of people probably don't know this or might be shocked by this. I was in a military program in high school down in South Florida. And that was where the idea of teaching began, because you kind of had to teach your fellow students. So going to university, I studied criminology, political science, and everybody thought I was going to go the law route or whatever, politics, something like that. But at the end of the day, I worked for a friend who had an ESL company like downtown, and just thought, you know what, teaching might be great, right? And realizing that, funny enough, in terms of justice, that the justice system maybe wasn't as just as I thought. That working in that system might not be, I wouldn't be able to be the change maker that maybe I could be. So, you know, give it a couple years, and I end up at 28, actually, a little bit maybe older, joining like public high school education. And it's just been an amazing ride ever since. And very much that origin story of seeing injustice in my own life. Like I'm white passing, you know, but you know, there were so many instances of racism and sexism and all kinds of things that just led me to believe that whatever I do in my life, it needs to be for change. So whether it was law or politics or whatever, anything, teaching, I can't just be just the teacher that opens that textbook and just teaches. I mean, I'm not judging that, and most teachers don't do that, but just that sense of I can use my position to really do something that's really important here.
Which you really do, and we'll jump into that. But so, are you saying that you grew up in America?
A little bit. So I've moved around quite a bit. So I was born in Montreal. My family's Moroccan, so they're immigrants multiple times over. We came to Vancouver first, and that was kind of the first instances of like racism in the school system. And then I went down to Florida. My parents basically went down there to help family, so we were there for 4 years. So like really, last year of middle school until like end of grade 11, I was in South Florida. You ready for the name of the town? Plantation.
Wow.
I went to South Plantation High. Yeah, and I didn't quite realize what that meant until, you know, kind of later when I came back up here. People were like, where were you? You know, like, what high school did you go to?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting little, like, telling people, you know, like, think about how you grow up and where you live and what that might mean and what's the historical background to that, right? So I've moved around quite a bit, but I am Canadian, proudly so, and very happy to be a Surrey resident now for, it'll be 12 years in the summer.
Amazing.
Oh.
Well, we're glad you're here making such awesome, like, big leaps and like changes in the school system. And like Sharon said, we'll definitely dive into that a little bit later. But you also are on the Share Vancouver board, which is awesome. But I just want to kind of find out how you found Share, or Share found you, and your involvement with them.
So my involvement with them started through January Mary LaPouze. And finding out about this documentary that was being made, and then kind of meeting Alex and hearing about Share. I teach at Matheson Secondary. It's a BIPOC school, like BIPOC staff as well. And that idea of like, how do we support kids that are queer, right? And staff members for that matter, but like also queer students, and wanting to find that culturally relevant, culturally sensitive kind of programming. Of course, Share Vancouver being one of the only ones that was kind of in town. So, and then finding out that January Mary LaPouze actually attended LA Matheson way back in the day, well before my time, and realizing that connection. So really where I got more involved was I got to write the curriculum guide for the first film. And that was such a great experience. And then I got to work with Sharon on Emergence. So I got kind of heavily involved. And I'm all about boosting people. I'm all about, kind of giving space to others. So not that Alex can't do that all by himself and is incredible, but any ways that I could bring that into the school system, any way that I could provide support from any number of lenses that I work in, that was part of my goal. And so last year, honored to ask to join the board. I'm not South Asian, although many people think I'm Punjabi actually, but at the same time, like coming from cultures that are non-Western, understanding a little bit of that journey and realizing that if he thinks my voice can help, I will do whatever I can to help share, continue to grow, and provide the amazing support that it does to so many people.
Yeah, no, you've done some great work, and we appreciate you, of course, as Share Vancouver as a whole, and bringing forth and just helping out in so many aspects. So it's been really great.
Anytime.
I'm just curious to what was that experience? Because that documentary came out in 2000.
Oh gosh, it was before COVID.
Before
so probably
COVID,
2018, 2019.
Yeah. And what was the experience like? Because I feel like now everyone, because as a teacher as well, everyone's talking about inclusion of queerness and every single aspect because of COVID, Black Lives Matter. Now it's like a shift in our thinking and our curriculum. But you were doing it before all that happened. So was there was there any backlash? Because the documentary talks about a trans woman who was murdered in U.S.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I took that head on, right? So the reality is, yes, you have this amazing social coordinator, trans woman, person of color, sex worker, right? All these different, angles to her life, and so not necessarily directly towards the film. Although it's always interesting to bring in new content, new materials that haven't been what they call vetted, right? Yeah. So I'm kind of the person that says do and then ask for forgiveness later, or not ask for forgiveness, just go whatever, get used to it. But there weren't necessarily big issues. Here's the thing though, in society around us, certainly there were concerns. Yeah. I've had those moments standing on a stage where somebody comes at you and says, why do you teach these things? Or you're indoctrinating our kids. And to be honest, yes, there's a shift, but as recently as earlier this year in May, being attacked for a school's Pride Week, and being called a groomer and being called all kinds of names, an attempt to, get me fired and get the people that were part of our week in trouble as well. So yes, there's a shift, but it really depends on who you're talking to. Right. What was powerful though was being able to work on that curriculum, to say to educators around the world, you can talk about these issues. You can have conversations, and I'm very dialogue based. So it's not just about, here, read this and believe this, A to Z, but rather let's actually talk about where you are. And if you don't understand this, why? And, let's really explore, what it means to be trans, right? The realities around being a person of color and trans, a sex worker, all those things, right? So I love the nuance. And where the shift has been is the nuance. So the idea that we can have those conversations now, sometimes they have to be really simple, but sometimes we can go well deeper into it. And that now there's more representation. But absolutely, it was difficult. And from a student perspective, having students talk to you and unfortunate realities of trying to commit suicide, of thoughts of harm, of my parents won't accept me, all those things. So to me, it was here's a way that I can help them. Yeah. Right? I can't necessarily change their life overnight. I can't convince their parents overnight. I can't change the world overnight. But if I bring in this film and they see it and we can have those conversations, or just they volunteer for a share event, right? Yeah. They see a teacher putting out this content on their own social media and then they pick up on that, right? That was how that got started. And I never really thought about the detractors. They might come to me in terms of other things I was doing, but it certainly was an open door for a conversation. And I would say that overall, you gain allies that way rather than create, forever enemies.
For sure, yeah. I think it's such a shift and a change, like Sharon's saying, even growing up, never ever heard about that, never spoke about any of that stuff. In schools, in elementary, high school, so yeah, kudos to you. And I think there just definitely needs to be more teachers out there yourself that are just fighting and advocating and standing up for the kids, and also being such a support system for them, right? There's not a lot out there, even till this day, giving what you're giving to the students?
There's a lot of us, but at the same time, it's very easy to be criminalized. You can lose your
Yeah.
job. Like it's a harsh reality. There's power to it, which is what really got me angry when families would talk about other kids, not their own kids, and be like, oh, is that person gay? Like, oh, I'm worried for that family. And I was like, what are you talking about? You know,
Yeah.
oh, they might not go to their business. Like, it was revolting to hear that. And I'm like, where does love come in? Like, love for your child over, you know, like a community telling you what to do, when to do it, right? So I want to be mindful of that. Like, I'm at the point in my career where, and I do a lot of work so that if anybody comes at me, I'm going to fight hard. Right?
Yeah.
But I do know that there are some harsh circumstances till this moment
Yeah.
in certain areas, right, around the world, even in Canada, in BC, where if you go this far, you're going to get your hand slapped, if not worse. And especially for people of color. I have white passing privilege. I kind of use it to my advantage. But other people don't have those advantages. So
Yeah.
I need to be even louder in a way,
Yeah.
right? So that other people coming in, I'm that shield. So that they can do that work. And then it's kind of like, well, just blame me, right?
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of idea.
I think having you as a staff, like, so powerful, and, like, you know, taking other teachers with you and supporting them is huge. Because, like, obviously we know that, like, being a teacher and being out and queer and proud it's difficult. If you are, then everyone will come up to you and ask for help and resources. And it's
Yes.
like, I don't know everything about everything. Still
Exactly.
learning. And also, if, like, for example, I teach kindergarten, I don't necessarily want to start a GSA or, like, you know, just because it's still scary. Because my demographics of my school is like 99% Punjabi parents.
Right.
And the kindergarten teacher, oh, why is she, you know, so I'm still, I still have a long way to go, but it just shows that we have made a huge progress because we're talking about it in schools. And I think,
Society has a long way to go.
yeah.
You're there.
Yeah.
You know, like you know what you want to do and how you're going to do it. I think it's the rest of us that kind of have to go, let's trust our queer educators.
Yeah.
Let's trust those in the community, even and allies as well, that you know, we're not doing this to harm people. This is not what it's about at all. But yeah, absolutely, the pressure is there as a queer educator to do that work.
And if you're colored, because they had that, like this STA, BCTF, like all BC teachers, SOGI, like come represent.
Yeah.
And I was the only person of color.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? We have a long way to go. And I think we were all chatting, like, how did we not get any people of color to represent this committee?
Yeah, there's still obviously a lot of cultural barriers too, and like being out.
Yeah.
I mean, I even have like a Caucasian friend that's in the school system and is not out to staff. Or sorry, is out to staff but not students or the parents. And I was like, I totally get it. You know, I mean, I'm like, I'm brown, I get it. I'm you know, still very closeted. So, but he's just like, yeah, it's not worth it. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's all good. I'm like, everybody's at their own comfort level.
Yeah.
And that totally makes sense. So. Yeah, there's always barriers, some which way or the other, and that's why I'm saying, yeah, it's great that you are doing what you're doing in the school system right now, and helping out so many students and parents understand a bit
and
better.
sitting on the shoulders of giants, right? We have James Chamberlain, people that really changed Surrey forever, going all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Like, there's a legacy here that now we can build on. Like, I don't necessarily have to fight over books anymore, right? Like, there's committees, you get to look at these books before they're in the classroom. Like, it's great to see that in my career, but knowing that, you know, 20, 30 years ago, that was certainly not the case. So we're lucky to have these platforms, as hard as it can be. So any inch we can move is a good one. Like, just you being in the system, you being that one person, which is horrific to think about, but like, that's one more step. Right? It's one more, and that the conversations did happen. I remember that. I remember hearing about that. And because I know I didn't go because I wanted other BIPOC folk to go, and then realizing that, you know, you were the only one was kind of devastating.
And I think I got in because you had to, like, apply for it. I think I got in because my name's Sharon.
Oh gosh.
The whitest name.
Yeah.
It has helped me a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Now, like, teaching overseas and coming back, I know what it means to have a name that's not. Yeah.
That's super sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the reality.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck's going on right now, still till this day, right?
Yeah. I think just wanting to touch on, like, because we understand that teachers are so fearful, but you're at this journey now where you are, like, you know, an anti-oppression teacher, anti-racist educator. Where does the fire come from? Where does that every day to go out and be with the community, where does that come from?
I never saw myself in the books that we used when I was growing up. I was always like one of the minorities, and then having incidences where, because of where my family's from, I used to have an accent, and maybe I still do, but anyways, I used to have a stronger accent, and being put into like speech therapy because I wouldn't get a job, being put into lower level classes because, well, you can't be this smart, you're an immigrant, right? So that, and then being from the MENA region, like Middle East, North Africa, and the violence, the constant violence, and realizing as I was growing up, especially in adulthood, that these things were not created just because we're violent people. Like, it wasn't our deficit. It was white supremacy. It was, and again later, cis heteronormativity, like all these different realities that actually pushed us down. So now I'm in the system, right? I'm in the system. What does that mean, right? How do I push things so that I don't do the damage that other people did to me? And maybe unknowingly, right? Again, right? All of us are unpacking a lot of realities that we grew up with, that settler conditioning. So how do we undo that? So that fire comes from, I need to practice what I preach. I can't stand in front of a room and talk about justice and equality and equity and all these different things at any age, like French 8, right? Talking about colonization, right? Like this happens should happen in every classroom. And then mix that in with the reality of coming to Surrey and really loving it here and the community and wanting to fight back, right? Like, our school is better than all the stereotypes. Our city is better than the idea of don't go over the bridge, which I remember hearing when I was first here, super young. So I don't know, I'm a bit of a fighter. I have a chip on my shoulder, no doubt, right? And it's like, well, then we have to get out there. And then realizing that together we are stronger. And having kids understand, you might be straight, you might be white, you might be whatever, you might be Punjabi, but if there's like an Indigenous resistance movement, if that, like, whatever it is, or women's rights, like, you should be there. Yeah. Yes, of course you want to fight for your own rights, but the only way we're actually going to demolish a system that's built to oppress all BIPOC, all queer, so many levels, is if we come together. And watch Wakanda Forever, for people who haven't yet. Like, it's that idea that you can't fight each other. You have to fight together against those larger systems. I do believe that's part of education. And I've learned that from incredible BIPOC educators elsewhere in the world, where to be a teacher is to meet harassment and violence and death, like assassination, right? And they still do that. And as they tell us often, if you're not teaching to transform, if you're not teaching to liberate, then why the hell are you teaching?
Damn.
Right?
I'm fired up.
So like, that puts the pressure on you to go, whoa, right? And again, everybody's, I don't have kids, blah, 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 right? All that. But everybody can do their part. Yeah. Right? But I know the power when you go to, like, remember Rohingya Muslims that came to us, and there was genocide, or there is ongoing genocide in Myanmar, Burma. And I brought out a couple posters and a couple kids, and a rally that was, 30 people was 40. Like, it was just a little bit bigger, and they didn't have to spend money that they were needing to eat and survive, and the school could provide those little bit of resources. Like, it's amazing. And I want kids to know that. It's that little thing. It's not being on magazine covers and whatever, getting awards. Like, it's the littlest moments. It's those moments in time when you're standing next to someone next to you and you're fighting for that right. You are stronger together. So we need to teach that. Yeah. Instead of what used to be, which was divide and conquer. Get yours, and that's it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Annie, you are also doing a lot with the LGBTQ aspect and Indigenous aspects and bringing that into the curriculum. We just wanted to gain a bit better perspective of like how you're able to do that and like the work that you are doing within the curriculum there.
Yeah. I exist at a very special time, as Sharon says, that there has been a shift. And so I feel like, unlike other folks, maybe a little bit less of a barrier, though of course, like, under-resourced, so it is carrying a lot of the weight. It's trying to make space. So I'm not Indigenous. I'm a settler here, right? There's a lot to focus on that. But how can I be that co-conspirator? How can I be that person that goes, no, we shouldn't do it this way, right? Or introducing different ways of knowing, right? That then I can bring in that person who knows more, right? To actually do that. I'm an Indigenous graduate advocate, so I do have a caseload. So specifically, how do we raise the identity of our Indigenous students to a level like they're proud of it, they can learn more about it, really undoing what the system has been trying to do all along. So that's a very interesting journey, because I don't know a lot, right? Yes, I've done this for quite a few years now, but it really is trying to open that door to say, no, we need a lot more of this, right?
Yeah.
And how do we put that into our curriculum and into our classroom? So a lot of times people go, oh, I'm scared. How do I do this? And I'm like, okay, I get that, but there's no reason to fear. Because that falls into the stereotype that, oh, Indigenous people are going to get angry. You know, it falls into all that weird vibe.
And that's a real...
It's a real
reality,
thing, right?
for teachers.
Same thing with queer issues as well, right? They'll say that, oh, but, you know, I don't know, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, and pronouns this. And I'm like, you know, at some point, it's going to be perceived as homophobia. It's going to be perceived as racism. Because I'm at that point, to be quite honest. Like, I kind of lose patience a little bit with that. I'm like, yeah, but there's so many people trying to show you.
Yes.
And it's not hard to elevate certain people to allow you to have that. So whether that's Share Vancouver or whatever, community or whatever other group, right? Like, we can have these conversations. We can include that in our curriculum, right? And I'm also just, again, I'm done having students not seeing themselves.
Right, yeah.
I'm done with our system saying just assimilate. You know, it gets better. That was a great campaign back in the day. But I remember, you know, especially queer BIPOC folk that were like, but I want it to be better now. Like, why do I have to face mental health issues, emotional health, physical issues, you know, and then I have to wait till I'm an adult and these celebrities are telling me it's going to get better, right? Like, it was good because it was needed to, like, give that hope. But hope is not the same thing as transformation and change, like, on the ground.
So, and you're doing, like, I mean, bringing in even, like, you are the deputy head is what you were saying, right? Department head, sorry, the department head for like Indigenous studies at school. So that's super awesome. I mean, again, same, you know, I never grew up learning anything about that. The social studies books were all on white colonialism, you know, and I really hope there is a drastic curriculum change. And there's people like yourself fighting for that and putting those into place, right? So I think that's just super awesome that you're doing that. And it's just, it's just so we're so far behind, you know, we're so far behind.
And I want people to know, our kids or adults, whoever you're dealing with, they know. Don't think they don't know. They're watching, right?
100%.
This is not inclusive enough, right? That this is still very heteronormative. This is still very white colonial structures. Like, they know. So we have to hold ourselves accountable to that as well. And you know, and kind of sing. I always say that, like, don't think that you can just get away with it. Like, people who are activists, people on the ground, they know when things are unjust. They might not tell you all the time because they have to preserve themselves and they can't take on the pressures of always being that person to, like, stick out, right? But at this, you know, but you have to realize that they have different lenses than you. So as an educator, when you're trying to be as inclusive as possible, it's like, okay, like, what can I do? And so having those kind of little opportunities for folks to say, here's a chance. I got a grant. Here's some money, right? Like, do something with it. And again, a lot of educators are doing this.
That's
it's
awesome.
It's going to get to a
It's definitely
critical
changing.
mass.
That's good. That's great to hear. I mean, I'm not in the education system in that regard, so hearing it from you guys and friends that are educators, I'm always like, oh my God, that's so great. That's like so good to hear. And I know you're saying, like, people might like push back, oh, you're not Indigenous, but at the end of the day, as individuals, we have to learn ourselves first, right? And educating ourselves.
And for the record, no one has ever told me that personally, right? But you're right. The idea of, like, we need to go on our own journeys.
Exactly.
You can't expect a queer person or an Indigenous person or a Black person to educate you 100% of the time, right? Of course, questions, but what are you doing on your own to start that process? But I have to say, the fear that people have that somehow a queer person will jump down your throat or an Indigenous person, they don't. They don't. They're just upset. They're disappointed, right? There's trauma there. So that anger needs to be validated, right? When they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. That's not coming towards you. That's you know, beneath, right? That's the under the iceberg, right? The under the water, right? All that stuff. So we have to have patience to know, okay, so I need to do more work myself so that when I want to engage with people, then it's going to be a smoother path and I'm not overburdening them with things that they've had to deal with every single day of their life.
I do. I fully agree that we just all need to educate ourselves, and slowly but surely we'll get to that point. And it's about checking out workshops, seminars, people speaking, and just reading, right? Our audiobooks, whatever you name it, podcasts,
yes.
You know, educating ourselves, getting the resources and so forth. So I don't know.
Cool. I think we want to jump into your awesome shirt and knowing more about Mustang Justice, because that's such a great group almost you want to take it to another level. Maybe you could talk about that as well. And just hearing about this group makes you want to teach high school.
Yeah, so very much just, there's leadership in schools, and that's great, but it's usually like 1 class, 2 class, it's very limited. And I just realized like a lot of the issues that people want to advocate for, we want to mentor through identity. That was something I came up with many years ago now, that idea of like, how do we do that? And also connection to community. So not just in-house, in the 4 walls, you go home, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
So really all it is just like kind of like a youth service leadership crew, dedicated to justice. So we're not just fundraising, right? And actually, we don't really do a lot of fundraising.
Yeah.
Not that is not needed sometimes. When you have to fundraise because there's floods in Pakistan affecting, 33 million people, certainly, right?
Yeah.
When you want to fundraise funds for, a queer hotline for kids, struggling with mental health issues, absolutely. But typically it's very vertical and you don't actually change the system, right? Socks are great for a homeless person. It doesn't solve that they're unhoused. Right?
Yeah.
So trying to teach kids and have kids be involved with community organizations to do that work, to kind of do the heavy lifting, to do some of the learning, right? It's amazing to see, especially like in our school being, we don't have too many Indigenous, but like when you have South Asian folk helping at an event that's Indigenous and the amount of learning they get out of that, but also the support they can give. Whether it's like, helping elders get to their room, like whatever it is, right? So it's just a dedication to that. We're almost 10 years old now, which is just incredible to think. And we keep, whatever it is, any issues. A lot of our Muslim students have come forward wanting to talk about Islamic heritage more and combating Islamophobia. So that's kind of a new thing that we're kind of getting into now. There's never enough time. There's always more issues. But the little bits we can do to help with that is always amazing. And because I do a lot of work on the side, and it's not necessarily related to the school, but it is. It is. So maybe in the future you might see me branch out and do something. But for the time being, this will always be. Mustang Justice is that chance for all students. So my big rule is this: the whole school is Mustang Justice, because we all have to work for justice every day.
That's right.
So there's no list. There's no president. There's no nothing, right?
Is this after school, 8 to 12?
It's after school, after school, 8 to 12. I mean, sometimes we do things during the day, right?
Yeah.
So it's like speakers that come in, events that we have in our school, like Mustang Justice will organize that. So it's really like an all-day thing, but most of the volunteering happens after school, on the weekends, etc.
And is it, sorry, not to cut you off, is it just LA Matheson that's involved, or is it like anybody can come, show up to help out?
As we've started growing, like it's interesting, we've had kids reach out to us, sometimes like the friends of those going to other schools.
Of course.
And absolutely, especially with COVID, we had a lot of Zoom meetings, like where we had multiple schools from around like the province. So bit by bit, we're seeing that. I think during school events can be difficult. There's district policies, but like if it's like a global peace festival, right, then absolutely, like anybody can join us, and then I'm just like the supervisor for the day, right? But it's really important. Like I'm trying to decolonize it. I'm trying to have it be like everybody. It's communal. It's grassroots, and a big emphasis on community. Don't reinvent the wheel, right? I get you want to help the homeless, but there's a million organizations doing that work. So what else can you do, right? Or can you add your voice to more of the justice end of things, right? Talking to MLAs and MPs and whatever. And really uplifting marginalized groups, small little organizations that really don't have that much clout at all.
For sure.
But you give CBC a heads up that this event's happening, and maybe they'll come, right? And there's students there, so maybe there's an education angle to it. So it's a little bit strategic in a way, right? But the whole school and more are Mustang Justice, and anytime students can come and help and start initiatives or just help out with initiatives that we do. Black History Month, Indigenous Week, Pride Week, whatever. Like anytime you are here and we can help. And it is meant to elevate, students that we're not a rich school. We're a wide socioeconomic breadth, no doubt, but we are still considered inner city. So they don't have the parents that are lawyers and whatever, right, to kind of like go get their experience in the real world. So I am trying to create those opportunities for kids to get into realities that those doors are not always open to them.
So we'll bring it back to if anybody else is listening from other schools, y'all can join in and get together for any teachers who are listening.
And a shout out to all the teachers that I do talk to, and then they make their own things. So like, it's cool. It's really organic, and but you're always welcome to join our events as well.
Well, great. That's
the
good
next
to hear.
one is drag bingo
Yes,
next week.
yeah, Youth Drag Bingo Night in collaboration with Youth for a Change. Martin Rooney will be there from Surrey Pride. Cher will be there.
Wow.
And really excited. It's the first one to be in school. And just for the record, like, there were no issues in terms of like a drag queen coming to school. I know there's been issues around that, or continues to be. But if anything, just security, whatever, like the basic red tape of it all. But so Wednesday night, and you can sign up through it. There's an Eventbrite link that you can go to, 5:30 to 8 p.m.
This just shows how far we've come. Like, I can't imagine when we were growing up to have a drag
show,
bingo.
Yeah, no, that's super amazing.
Yeah, and it's for students from across the district, and I'm really excited. We should have a nice, interesting bunch of folks.
Yeah, and you've been involved in like many protests for like Indigenous rights to immigrants, refugees, and other like marginalized groups. But you recently spoke at a rally in solidarity with the revolution in Iran.
Yes.
Can you talk about that day and the energy that was like kind of brought to the rally, and like why is this work important to you?
Yeah. So because I do a lot of union work as well, and at provincial levels and local level, we got to meet Masood Amini. And actually, the way I was introduced to it is that there are like many teachers jailed in Iran right now. In fact, there's union workers on strike right now. So like it's I don't want to swear, but it's horrible over there, right? Like there's so many things going on, right? And it is tied to like the theocracy and the regime that's in place right now. So basically, Masajina Amini is murdered, right, by the state. However that happened, right? She was murdered for basically somehow not wearing her hijab correctly by the morality police. Right. And again, because we're trying to fight for like a nuanced fight for rights. This is not against Islam. This is not against Iran. This is not against the idea of hijabs, right? Like, we want freedom so women can make a choice of what they do, which is actually at the root of Islam as well, in terms of a hijab and why you wear it. So it was a union night. So Masood Amini asked us to come down, and I was honored to do so. I represented the BCTF along with the president and an Iranian teacher, Ronak, who spoke beautifully. And it's just, again, that idea of solidarity. Yeah. When we go to these rallies, and then as an educator, so what can we do to make sure that these topics are brought up in our schools? I was reminded the other day that the Indian farmers' protest, when that was happening, there were families in Ontario that complained to the school board about why this was being taught in schools. I think it might have been the Indian government as well. But that brought it back to me of like, can you imagine if you're told don't bring up the Iranian situation? Yeah. When you're teaching students from that part of the world, and not even. Like, I don't care. You might be white as white bread, like Wonder Bread. And like, why shouldn't they know about what's happening to people overseas, right? Yeah. And we do have a role to play in that as well. Yeah. So the idea is that, yes, I'm a citizen. I'm a human. I think, I don't know what the quote's from, but, I have a price to pay, right, in terms of living on this earth. And I think that price to pay is activism and showing up and giving my support. And I'm a Sephardic Jew. I'm an Arabic Jew. And I think it's important to show that solidarity between Muslims and Jews and break that narrative that somehow we're enemies. 100%. We're not. I come from a country where they live together in coexistence for a very long time. It angers me when people try to suggest that there's this gulf. It's all manufactured. It's all fake, right? It's all constructed. It's not actually real. So I was there to provide my voice and to continue that real fight with unions to see what we can do to actually, whatever it means, to try to, when I say harm the regime, I mean like to change the regime, to allow people's voices in Iran to have a democratic voice as to who they want to see lead them and how they're led.
That ties back to what you say, I teach what I preach. So your kids, like on your Instagram page, I know your students are following you because you post about Mustang Justice events. So just being a student in that shoes and seeing your teacher out there with the megaphone, just going for it. I think that's
because the kids can't really show up, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, here's what's happening, just so you know, right? Yeah. Look it up, right? Here's an organization that you can find out more about. Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like we're feeling so fired up.
Yes.
Where are we going after this? We are coming towards the end of our episode, but we do want to talk about queerness and, would you be open to sharing your role in the LGBT world? And I know recently we worked together in this discussion guide, and we were chatting. I don't know if you wanted to discuss. Yeah,
that was a great experience, by the way, right? You're an amazing educator, and I love that the back and forth we did to create what I think is a great curriculum guide for the film Emergence. Let me put it this way. So the other day, a student, we were talking about like cis and trans and all these different realities, and because those flags hang in my classroom, and non-binary and intersex, and so finally they go, oh, I said I'm cis, and they went, I always thought you were like gender fluid. And first I went, I was like, I'll take that as a compliment. Like, that's so cool. And I'm like, well, but also I haven't had those experiences of not feeling like a woman, right? So like, while certainly my gender expression might be all over the place, and like, I'll own that, and that's cool. But like, you know, internally, no, I don't want to take up that space. But what happened was a couple years ago, just realizing that, you know, in trying to pass as just this like only heteronormative kind of person wasn't working, right? And really it was kind of a lie in terms of thinking about how I felt about gender, how I felt about orientation. Why should I follow this idea that somehow there's a right way, right? There's a straight way. And so I just found myself going, that's not how I feel inside. That's not how I express myself. Like literally. Yeah. I don't think anybody ever thinks I'm straight. So I was like, so why am I wearing this? I don't know how to describe it. I don't know, why am I trying to pretend to be something that I'm not? Like just kowtowing to a system that makes no sense, right? So I did come out. And it was and so pansexual, if anybody's, you know, curious.
And this is very recent, right?
This is definitely more recent, and just you know, again, because I never let myself be defined by that. I think that's a huge problem. Like, we are not our orientation. We are not our gender, right? And not to say that's not important, but it's not the only thing. Because that's how they built the laws against queer people, was to say you are only this. The gay purge in Canada, you are only this. You might be a soldier, a police officer, a doctor, but because you're gay, you can't exist in our world, right? So it's an important part of our identity. But the idea is like, how do we then, you know, be in the world where we can be celebrated, right? So and you know, because the more I spend time and do this work and kind of open up to it, I just felt there was a real gap of like, you know, I'm not being true to myself. I'm not being true to other people. Not that, again, I didn't make a big point of it, right? But why not just be completely open? Yes, of course, there was fear, right? Like, again, very supportive overall from most people. But remembering the principal, before this principal, when I presented to the grade 8 class, talking about Mustang Justice, but I wanted to bring forward the GSA, like Mustang Pride and stuff like that. And I did introduce myself as cis pan, and afterwards she goes, that was so brave. And I was like, it's 2021. Why is that brave? Like, and you know, and what can we do to change that, right? It shouldn't be brave. It should just be, that's who you are, right? It's like saying, oh yeah, my family's from Morocco, you know, like, you know, oh, I live in Surrey. Like, it should be as simple as that, and that to be celebrated, to not have it be stereotyped, right? So we have a long way to go in that, and I know that we are getting to a better place where queer educators can be more accepted. So I think, had you talked to me 12 years ago, was I ready for that? Probably not. But that's, again, I always say, it's not about us, though. Of course, there's always work to do within ourselves. Not to say there isn't. But society's telling you not to. Invisibly. Hidden curriculum.
That's where the instilled fear comes from, right? It's society. As a whole, unfortunately. But again, we're slowly but surely getting
It's those
to
little
that.
things, right? Oh, when are you getting married? You know, like those little nicks.
Always.
Right? It's those microaggressions, right? It's like, oh, he's cute, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, whatever, right? Like, it's interesting that the little things that people might say to knock you down, and of course, when you have that lens, you're always thinking about that. So that was something too, right? It's like, well, I have all these years of thinking about these things, and then at the end of the day, be joyful, be proud, like literally be proud, right? Like, enough. Don't just talk the theory. Just be it, you know? It's also like being BIPOC or from an immigrant family. Like, you can try to assimilate, but why? Like, why? Who does that give power to, right? It doesn't give power to you, right? So, and again, the more we're open about this, the more people are going to be willing to. And as an educator, again, it is really powerful when kids will come to you more.
Yeah.
Oh, I just realized that, right? Or that's cool that you said that. Or even having kids come up to me like, oh, I'm pan too, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
There's definitely
that's
importance
cool.
of it, hence why like we have this podcast to let people know that there's people out there that they can turn to.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you being a teacher who has recently, it's not like the only thing about you, but we recognize that in our society it's still like the biggest thing, coming out, la la la.
Yeah.
But kudos to
and
you.
it's a real reality of like you have to keep coming out,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not out to everybody, you know, whatever. Like some people, you know, like it is what it is, right? But certainly being the Grand Marshal, that was a moment. That was like a lifelong dream. I never saw myself there, and to find out that I was selected, it was just like, whoa, you know, like
That's
full circle
pretty big,
moment.
though. That's pretty big. So
And
I
to be
mean,
able to
maybe
do that.
touch on that just really briefly. Just how was that experience, and like how'd that come about?
Yeah, I have no idea. I still don't know who nominated me. So,
That's amazing.
but Vancouver Pride. But you know, knowing Lee Couple, who's executive director right now of Vancouver Pride, and so I know, like, talking to them, like the activism piece, right? The idea of like being an educator, doing all this work. I think what was phenomenal is that came right after we were attacked during our Pride Week, and that protester was there actually, so that was kind of cool to scream at him as I was driving by. But just that reality of we need this in our education. This is not an indoctrination. This is not a grooming. This is just like, this is the real world. This is biological, scientific, I don't know what metrics you want to put on it, but this is who we are as humans, as nature, right? As the world. And so it was cool to really dictate that, to say, yes, an educator is at the front of this, right? And again, not me. I mean, I felt I was representing all educators, right? Like, I think it was a decision that we need to make sure that education is put at the forefront. Because I think Canada, we're getting better.
Yeah.
America, they are going backwards like no tomorrow. And I speak about Florida because that's where I went to school. I have friends quitting the profession, afraid to come out. You know, mental health issues are on the rise. Like, it's so bad down there with Governor Ron DeSantis and many others. So to be in front, I met so many amazing people. To be with the first, you know, live Pride Parade in like 3 years.
Were you
or
like in a
2 years.
car? Like, you know, Alex had his
a really nice
car.
Porsche car. You know, I'm not into cars. That was the joke, right? But some people were like, oh, that's such a cool. A lot of the, you know, guys, oh, such a cool car. And I'm like, yeah, cool. If that's how you get into it, not a problem. By the way, it was a Pride Parade. You know?
Yeah. So were you one of the three?
Yes,
or?
one of the three. Yeah. So Dogwood Monarchist Society, who does amazing work in the queer community, and Kirsten Rivers, who's a Squamish Nation counselor, incredible human being, and just honored, and got to take part in several events and around Vancouver Pride, and now I'm on the Surrey Pride board, and
amazing.
Very much looking forward to adding even more energy to that. You know, I don't. Again, they don't really need me, I think, but just the chance to be part of that is incredible. Yeah. So I don't know. I just found out in Victoria at the anti-racism data legislation, I got this email saying, "You've been selected. Do you accept?"
That was
and
big.
I was like, and people were like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, yeah, you know. So one day someone will tell me how that all happened.
Really cool.
Well, that's great. No, there's you're saying you don't know why they select you. Everybody needs a bit of you in their lives for sure.
I mean, there's so many people they could choose, right? So, but it was a real honor, and you know, coming together. What a powerful message! It could really fit into what I try to do. Yeah.
We want to say thank you so much, Annie, for being on the podcast, and just sharing so much knowledge, and just your community work and everything that you do is top notch.
Yep.
As a lot of Indians say,
Very
A-class.
inspiring.
A-class. Yeah, Annie, so just want to give your social handles if anybody wants to connect with you, educators, students, whoever, everybody and anybody.
Probably the easiest way is through Instagram. So just at OHANASJ, so Ohana SJ. I am on Twitter, but I don't know how long that's going to last. Ohana_Annie. And even Facebook, Annie Ohana. You know, it's the Grand Marshal is my picture of me in a tutu in the car. So like, there's a couple of Annie Ohanas out there, but that'll be me. Yeah, and please reach out. Absolutely, 100%. I always love to collaborate with folks and kind of, you know, build that capacity with more and more and more people.
For sure.
We're all in this together.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you.
Again, for being on the podcast. We appreciate all the work that you are doing for the kids and the advocation of everything and anything that you're doing, really. So, thanks. And we'll say bye on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bye.